wanted to share a tool that I started using recently. And if you're doing any prospecting or lead sourcing from LinkedIn, it's definitely worth checking out. The tool is called Surf, and it's spelled Surfe. It's a Chrome extension that allows you to add contacts to your CRM directly from LinkedIn. I use it to add contacts quickly, follow my deals, keep track of my notes, and it's actually saved me a bunch of time. The data is always 100% accurate because I don't have to copy and paste each detail from each contact over to my CRM. Instead, Surf does it all for me automatically with just one click. Now, the folks over at Surf have been kind enough to put together a promo offer for fans of SSP. You can go to the link in the show notes and use the promo code JWSURF with an E 5 for a 5% discount on your first year. Check out the link in the show notes and go check them out. This one is for the savvy startups and SMBs out there. I've got a secret weapon for you that's going to skyrocket your sales without the unnecessary headaches that come along with using one of the big player CRM systems. That secret weapon is Close CRM. Now, let's face it, we've all been there. We've used a clunky, confusing system that kind of makes you want to throw your laptop out the window. Well, fear not, Close is here to save your time, money, and sanity. Close has all of the powerful sales tools you need, minus the drama, to manage your leads, track your deals, and crush your targets effortlessly. It has calling, emailing, SMS, multi-channel sequences, and it even has meeting tracking built right in. It's easy to set up and implement. You can stop screwing around with CRMs that aren't built for you and start selling and managing customers today. You can start a free trial using the link in the show notes, special for SSP fans. All right. My guest today is Chris Dankowski. Chris is a revenue strategist at Salesloft by day, a career advisor to sales reps by night. He's been an AE at Evernote, HubSpot, and Outreach, to name a few. And if you've been a longtime fan of the podcast, you know I've had Chris on the show before. In fact, he talked about going from being a bankrupt entrepreneur to being a SaaS seller at a top company. He's a personal friend of mine. I've known him now for about a decade. Today, we're talking about sales and sales careers. So he shares some insights that he's gathered around options that you have if you're burnt out in your selling role, how to sort of manage your mindset, and what paths you might consider taking once you've spent a number of years closing deals and you might be ready to move on to something new. So without further ado, here's Chris. Chris Dankowski, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
Yeah, so for the listeners, just a little bit of context. If you haven't heard the previous episode that Chris and I did probably about a year and a half ago, we talked about Chris's career starting out as a small business owner, bankruptcy, and then ultimately he landed himself in the software business. Along that journey, he and I met in my first SaaS role at an e-commerce company out of Austin, where we were doing very highly transactional SMB sales. So here we are again. And Chris, tell us what you've been up to the last couple of months.
Yeah, sure. So when we initially talked, it was like shortly after I had pivoted out of sales entirely and got into strategic consulting. And since then, just over the past, I think, 5 weeks, I landed a job as a strategist with Salesforce. So I work in a team with a bunch of other people on 3 of their most highly valued strategic accounts to really just help them be more effective with the platform. And it's awesome. It's the same work I was doing before, except like for an agency that was both an outreach and Salesloft partner. So now I'm captive at Salesloft doing it. I made the switch because I wanted to like challenge myself, and also like I'm a logo collector. So it's kind of like I've worked at Outreach, now I'm at Salesloft, and it's just awesome. It's a dream.
I'm really curious, how difficult is it to transition from being in a closer role or maybe even an SDR role into doing something like you're doing right now? Do you feel like you brought some special sauce to the mix, or was it network connections? Give us an idea for anyone out there listening who might be considering that as an ultimate career path.
Yeah, and this is like part of what I've been doing is kind of like, my side thing, right? Like you have the podcast, and I've been doing kind of like career coaching for sales reps over the past 9 months, both teaching them to like, how do you get an awesome job at a place like Outreach or HubSpot, places I've worked, or how do you just get entirely out of sales if you're burned out? And one of the things I recommend is to like really try to you want to pay attention to like your passions, like got a gnat in here, Austin, springtime. But like really pay attention to the things that like really charge you up and energize you, but also at the same time, try to juxtapose those against where is your expertise, right? So for me, like selling at outreach and then selling at HubSpot to a slightly lesser degree, where you're selling a sales engagement solution to sales leaders, sales operations leaders, learning about like their gaps, their problems, their fears, their nightmares, their challenges, their dreams, and helping them solve those problems for a good, over 2 years of my career collectively doing that. And just, being like admin certified on those platforms and things like that, and understanding the technical inner workings, it just gave me more expertise in sales engagement than like, your average person on the street, right? So I was able to leverage that expertise to get into consulting. So yeah, that's how that works. And the first job was network driven. It was, a colleague of mine, Dave Brashears, we worked at Outreach together. And it was like, dude, come work here. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you get it. Like, this is what we do all day. You can talk about this stuff. So it was awesome.
In a role like the one you're in right now, is it commission based? If you don't mind sharing, I'm really curious
No.
what the structure is on that, or is it just kind of a flat salary with maybe a bonus for like
Yeah.
that at the end?
Yeah. It's project based work. I get a fat salary that I negotiated. I dragged them over the coals for it, and I get a nice quarterly bonus too, as long as I'm like doing good work, which I'm confident I'm going to be doing good work pretty regularly.
No, that's really cool. And this is a topic that I know I've done some soul searching on, right? At different points in my career, I thought to myself, how many more years can I do this? I'm just being, super transparent. There's been some high highs and low lows. I want to talk about that aspect of selling a lot more, especially in tech, because, after you've done it for 10, 15, 20 years, it can really start to wear on you. It can start and so the daydreaming starts of what could I do if I were to stop doing this? It's really, really hard to stop because tech sales is such a lucrative career field. It's such a good life. In some ways, it can have periods where it's really easy and everything just falls into place perfectly and you're winning all the time. But then then you can go through a period where you're struggling and you're missing numbers and things like that. So what I want to kind of hear about from you today is what some career options are. Maybe we'll cover a couple of different things. I know we want to talk about how you can land your dream role in tech sales to start to kind of build that lifestyle so you can then start to think about what comes next. And then let's talk about, what are some options for people that are that want to transition out of sales at some point. And most of the people I know that start to get into, I hate to say specific ages, but the reality is I think a lot of my colleagues are kind of in their late 30s now, heading towards 40s. And a lot of them are thinking about how many more years can I do this and what comes next? And if you're not going to get into a leadership role in a company, can I keep being an account executive or a field sales rep for another 10, 15, 20 years when I'm already 41, 42? How many more years can I do this? So yeah, I want to hear kind of your thoughts on this. It seems like you've been pretty entrenched. You've achieved a lot of it. You've worked at some amazing companies. You've worked with a lot of reps who've done a bunch of different things. So I definitely want to, maybe we start with the pivoting. Start with pivoting, then we can go into kind of landing a dream role.
Well, and just like you hit the nail on the head on a lot of things, and it's like sales is always a largely a mind game, right? You have to be mentally strong. There's, like you said, the high highs, the low lows. My first sales mentor, Matt Harless, in San Diego, he was like, you just got to stay right in the middle all the time. Like, don't celebrate when you crush quota. Don't, go and pout when you miss by 50%. Like, just stay right in the middle. That's all it is. And at the same time, it's a sprint. It's not a marathon. It's like whether you're on like a quarterly sales cycle, monthly, annual, it's, you're charging up, you're in this race. It's a race to the finish. And then when you finish, it's like, here's your prize. You get to start all over again. Right. And that's tough. You don't see that with like, a lot of other types of professions. Right. And so I always I always tell people like the reason we're paid so well in sales is because we have to put up with a lot more bullshit than most other roles, right? You have to deal with that mental aspect more than other people. And at the same time too, like the thing you talked about, getting into your late 30s, your early 40s, you got kids, you got a mortgage, and health and wellness and longevity in your career start to become more of a priority. And you start thinking about like, yeah, how much longer can I do this, or what's next, or like, do I want to be 60 and an account executive and just grinding it out still? Can I do that? And it's like, for a lot of people, no. And like, if you were like me as a rep, like there's almost like shame when you start thinking about those things. Like, am I a loser? Like, am I not good enough for this? Like, because we're competitive by nature. That's why we do good in this profession. But, it almost feels like you're taking a loss. But that's not it. Like, I don't think the profession was designed for someone to come in at 22 and, sell their ass off until they're 65 and then retire. I think it's very much for most people in the profession, maybe more than half, but less than 75%. It's like a stepping stone to something else. So the other part of your question, like what comes next and how do you figure that out? The obvious ones are like leadership, manager, director, VP. Then there's all these things that I think, given today's economy and how companies, especially in the tech space, are like shifting to a focus on profitability. I think there's these sales adjacent roles that I call them, where it's like it might be just different enough to feel energizing for you, where it's like retention and renewals, CSM work, stuff like that. So it's kind of like after the sale or outside of the sale, where you could still use a lot of those same skills. You're still kind of managing a pipeline. You're going to have some kind of quota, but it's going to be different enough from what you've been doing for the past 10 years that, you might, be re-energized by it. And then, enablement. If you're the type of sales rep who like, you actually enjoy the enablement sessions that you have internally in your company and like you look forward to them and you like adopting new tools and like going through Sandler training and things like that, like start thinking about like, how can I get into enablement, and start like talking to the enablement people at your company or people in your network and like, just kind of kick the tires on it and start kicking it around. If you are a real freak and weirdo and you like using Salesforce, like go down there. There's tons of money in that. Like go the trail path or all those different certifications they have. Get one certification and build a resume around it and start seeing if you can get into sales operations, and then continuously get certifications. You get paid more with every certification basically. And then the option like I talked about, if you just want to, if you're none of that shit sounds good, like just start thinking about like, where's my expertise, right? Like I was working with someone and he was talking about, oh, I think I want to get into venture capital. I think I want to get into strategic partnerships. And I'm looking at his experience, and he sold for like Indeed and another company similar to Indeed. So this was like almost a decade of his career. And I'm like, well, dude, there's probably agencies that consult huge companies with like how to better use these platforms like Indeed or like, monster.com or whatever, ladders. I don't know what the platforms are now, but like you could probably provide a lot of value to organizations just telling them like how to do that type of stuff better. And it was like a light bulb went off, and it was like, and that would be so natural too. So like really think about like, oh, I worked at Google. I had to get an AdWords certification. Like, well, there's agencies that just do AdWords shit that like, you could probably walk in and, you would be a rock star there immediately.
Yeah, I know a few people that sold a software product, a SaaS product, maybe left that SaaS company and started an implementation company around that. The product. I could go sell the back end professional services side, or some kind of consulting or implementation service around this product, and I already know how to sell. I already know the product. Here we are. So I like that. I think look inward and see, one, what are you most interested in, and what skills do you have from your career that are marketable in another arena? What are some ways someone can start to kind of detach from, let's just call it the rat pellets that are commission checks, right? Like how does, because that's the hard thing is it's really addicting to keep going, and it's hard to stop and think about what comes next, especially if you're having a good run and you're having a good year and keep hitting your targets and you're making good money. What are some exercises someone can maybe start doing now to help them start to think about the next phase?
Yeah, good question. Well, one, like, and you started off kind of talking about like, those golden handcuffs and the commission checks. So I would say like just budgeting, see where you can scale back on like your overhead from a personal level, and just see if you can, cut some costs that really don't mean much to you, that aren't moving the needle, to take a little bit of that pressure off, right? Because money is freedom, right? But that works both ways, like having money, but also not needing it. Right. So if you need a little bit less money, you'll have a little bit more freedom, to make that career change. The other thing too, like, you can start a side hustle. So you can start something that you do like maybe 2 to 3 hours a week and just kind of like get a feel for it. Like me with the career counseling and guidance that I've been doing, I just put a block of like 2.5 hours on my calendar every Saturday morning. And it's just like, if I feel up for it, I'm gonna spend that time doing stuff about this. And then, the rest of the week passively, if I want to work on it, I can. Like, I'm sure you're kind of doing the same thing with the podcast, right? And the other thing too is like, you make a list of like what your dream job would be. All right, that's one. Make it, and I put a guide out where it kind of walks you through some of these processes. It's like 5 steps, and there's a workbook and all this stuff, and it's free. But one of the things is to like list out all the things that you love about your current job and selling. List all the things that you actually absolutely hate about it, right? To even determine if like maybe it's a company problem, a manager problem, a product problem, and not a sales problem, right? So figure that out. Once you figure that out, then you're listing out your passions, your qualifications, and your expertise, and you're aligning those to kind of figure out like where you should be, and try to come up with like 2 or 3 ideas of what you could possibly be happy with doing next. And then find people on LinkedIn, either in your network, outside of your network, and just start reaching out to them and being like, hey, I'm thinking about getting into demand generation. I'm thinking about getting into woodworking. I'm thinking about getting into, whatever the other HR, I was hoping we could just meet for 15 minutes and I could learn the good, the bad, and the ugly about the job. Right. And then, lastly, once you finally settle on something, it's like getting the resume together, selling yourself, which you're great at already because you've been doing it your whole life, and getting the job. And the other thing I'll say about money is like, that was a big fear of mine. And I think that's a lot of fear for people getting out of sales, is like, I'm not qualified for anything else. I make tons of money, and like, it's awesome. But and like I was thinking like, man, I'm probably gonna have to suck it up for a few years and really not make a whole lot, and oh, it's gonna be tight. And my next job right out of sales was 6 figures still. So like I got really lucky. It can be done, right? So like don't let that fear of financial insecurity hold you back necessarily. And that's on a case by case basis. I don't know what people's responsibilities are, but it can be done. You can, transition into something that's going to have an awesome income that's still going to be, sustainable for you and your family.
Yeah, I want to dig into a couple of things there. I like that first, when we talked about, side hustling, doing something on the side, blocking your calendar for a couple hours a week. And I like that you said, because this is obviously, being in sales, being in a contributor role or a leadership role, there's a lot, and there's some days that are going to be more hectic than others. And so I think it really comes down to what you feel like doing and being able to try to be consistent. It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Doing the coaching thing on the side, there's just an infinite number of different side hustles you can look at. And if you're interested in doing something like coaching, that's out there. But of course, there's also things like starting an e-commerce store or building a content business. Like there's just so many different things that someone can do, especially if you already know how to sell. So I touch on that too, because I think the big silver lining here is that because you've pretty much done one of the hardest roles, if not the hardest role in any business, which is frontline selling, it really does make it easier to sell yourself. It makes it easier to sell ideas internally. And if you end up transitioning into another role inside of a company, likely you're going to have a big leg up on some of your peers because you do know how to sell. You're innately curious. You know how to ask the right questions. You know how to move something from start to finish. You know how to follow, you know how to write emails well, generally speaking. And these are all skills that, in my career I've developed, and most of my peers who've sold for a long time have, a really high aptitude in these areas. And those are very much transferable into other parts of the business. Again, marketing and revenue, rev ops. There's so many different things you can do, and all of those same skills are going to transfer.
100%. Yeah, I think sales is one of the most transferable, skills, crafts, whatever. Sales and writing, really. So, like, you hit the nail on the head. And the other thing I would say is like, treat it as like a fact-finding mission. You're trying to figure out what to do next, and allow yourself to be really super, super curious. And like, don't think of any of your ideas as like stupid trash ideas. Like when I first decided I was getting out of sales, but I had no clue what I was doing next, like I was leaving no stone unturned. I was thinking like, maybe I want to go into woodworking and start making furniture. And I started emailing like woodworking places in Austin being like, do you need an apprentice? Like, I'll work for free. I know sales. I can help you with sales. And like, you teach me the craft. And it never went anywhere. But, I was still like making the initiative and just kicking the tires on it. And then through that process, like you'll feel it in your gut. You'll like, this feels right or this doesn't feel right, and it'll be evident for you. The other thing too, I was like, well, like sales I don't like, but I like being close to the money, aligned with revenue. And so I was like, my first thought was, oh, marketing, like I should just get into marketing somehow. And it seems like it would make sense, like you're in sales, marketing should be an easy transition, but it turns out it's not super easy. But I went and I got a bunch of marketing certifications, like really hard ones, and like spent hours a day going through all these like e-learnings and getting these certifications. I built a marketing resume. I talked to a bunch of people in my network. I had a couple interviews for like content marketing jobs. And during those interviews, it was like I felt myself not being nervous before the interview or excited at all. There were no butterflies. And then kind of having the interview and having it go good, but also thinking in the back of my head, like, I hope they don't offer me a job because I don't think I'm like confident enough to turn it down at this point. So it was, just be curious, try everything, but like listen to your gut too. And it's going to be a process. It's not going to be like a smooth, kind of thing. But what you're really looking for is like direction. You're going from something, you can do in your sleep, you're comfortable with, to like something brand new, just like when you first got into sales, it was like, maybe it wasn't something you dreamed of or thought about for a long time. It was just like a buddy told you, hey, I'm doing this thing, I'm making tons of money, like you want to do it with me,
Yeah. So I want to transition a little bit into landing dream opportunities, specifically something you mentioned, which is, even after you left sales, you still managed to land yourself your opportunity in a non, but maybe focus on selling roles for the moment here, because I think, first of all, I have a really diverse audience that that I understand. Most of my listeners come from different stages of their sales career, different points in their sales journey. But there's probably a good fraction of my listeners out there who are not yet making six figures in sales or corporate in general, right? What are some ways that someone out there listening right now can start to target in and pursue high paying opportunities? And when I say high paying, I mean six figures and over, multiple six figures, and the sky's
Yeah.
What are some skill sets? What are some steps they can take right now to start to prepare for that?
Yeah. So one, you have to like have a clear vision of where you're headed. So it sounds cliche, right? And I probably get like people rolling their eyes when I say it because it's like, yeah, no duh, but a 5-year plan, like set a North Star is like kind of your pie in the sky dream, and give yourself like, see what you would need to do to get there in 5 years. So for me, I was in San Diego. I was working in a legit boiler room. Like there was no CRM. We were, you were faxing invoices to people. They would FedEx checks in. You would take the credit card over the phone and write it down on a slip of paper and then give it to a boss who would run the credit, like crazy stuff. But like I came up with this dream, like I want to be an account executive at Google, right? And like I didn't even know what that meant really, but I was like, I thought Google was the best company ever, and I was like, yeah, if I could be an account executive there and sell to like huge corporations, like that would be it. And so I just thought about like, okay, let's take a step backward. Like, what do I need to do? So what you do is you find someone that has that job on LinkedIn and you look at their job experience and you just track it back. It's like, okay, what did they have before that role? What did they have before that? What did they have before that? And compare where you are to like their past experience and keep going down their experience until it aligns, and then just sort of copy their path. So if it was like account executive at Google, SDR at Google, inside sales rep at, whatever, Yelp, and then, boiler room. And it's like, okay, I need to be an ISR at Yelp and I need to crush it for 2 years. And then I need to get into Google as like an ISR and SDR, and I have to crush it for 2 years. And then I could be an account executive at Google. So now I have to figure out, how do I come up with a resume that's going to take my experience and make it attractive enough that I can get in at Yelp and get that ISR role, right? And I'm just like giving a hypothetical, but that's the framework that you would use. And also like, again, like do your research, kick the tires, like reach out to that person that isn't a Google and be like, hey, this is my dream. I would love to do it. I would love to like, hear about what your day to day is. And maybe it sucks. Maybe it's a nightmare. Maybe it's not what you thought it would be. But, nowadays, like there's all these tools like RepView and Bravado and Glassdoor, and you can do like a lot of research. So, do the research, figure out what you want, set that North Star, and then figure out like, can I get there in 5 years and how would I do it? And do it by looking at someone who's done it and, follow their steps and copy them.
Yeah, this is great advice, and it's something that I've been doing for a long time. And I don't just do it. Fortunately, there's LinkedIn out there. I can go look at people that I admire in the industry and try to reverse engineer their career, and really map out how they got to where they are. I would, if I were out there listening, I would be doing that. Find people that you admire. Maybe you know them. Maybe it's your manager. Maybe it's your VP of sales. Maybe maybe it's a relative. It doesn't really matter. Do that, and then also study great business. I think one of the most underrated things you can do is read biographies of people like Steve Jobs,
Yeah.
Bill Gates, whoever, right? Like go and actually try to understand how Mark Benioff built Salesforce. And all of these people have biographies. So even though you may not be aspiring to be the next Steve Jobs, it's still really interesting to kind of read biographies and read and reverse engineer people's careers, right? And never get to the CEO level of a company like Apple, it's still really interesting to kind of gather insights about how people did what and what that progression looked like. So that's one of the things that I've done. The other thing that I'll add to what you're saying is early on in my career, I had someone tell me that I should write down what I wanted to achieve for the next 5 years. And kind of to your point, but literally take out a pencil and write it down on paper, because there's a psychology in actually putting it down on paper and jotting it all out and saying by age 30 or by 2020, whatever, I want to be here doing this, working at Google, right? As an account executive, making 150K or whatever it is, right? So actually be really specific. And here's where it gets fun is I started doing that probably about 2014 or 2015. And now I wrote it down, but I also made a copy of it in my iPhone on my notes app. And I still go back and look at it and I'm like, that's pretty cool. In 2015, I wrote that this would be my goal and I actually did it. Or I maybe like over it. And then honestly, there's some years where I didn't hit it and had to come back to the table and say, maybe that was not the most realistic goal. Maybe I was being a little too ambitious. So be very specific, say, I want to be selling this type of product. I want to And this, by the way, doesn't just apply for career stuff. It can be financial. I have some fitness goals in my notes app that said I needed to be able to do this and lift this amount of weight or whatever it was. So you can get really specific on what those goals are, but write them down. There's a real power in being able to actually jot those down. And then you can go back and look at them in a couple of years and say, oh, hey, I did that. So that, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say 100% to that. Like I got the same advice from a Brian Tracy book, and it was like, 10 things and write them down and copy them like every morning. And I did that for like the longest time. Like I reached down to get it. Here's the journal I do all that crap in. This is the exact one. You could see like this is loose because I ripped a bunch of pages out of here, bunch of secrets. But like I would pick up that journal every morning and I'd write the same 10 things down, so they were fresh in my head. I was always thinking about them. And it's amazing, like how quickly you get there when you do that. And I'm glad you brought it up because it reminds me that like I should probably start doing it again. But like I love what you said about reading biographies, and like you kind of get a feel for like how people do that. And the other thing I do is like one podcasts like this or podcasts like WTF with Mark Maron. And like it's totally outside of sales. He's interviewing people from like entertainment, but he interviews them about their whole story from like their childhood until like when they became, who they are now, which is like a famous comedian, actor, musician, or whatever. And it's interesting just to hear how people kind of, architect their path to success, right? And you'll pick up some common trends. And like one of them is like kind of having like that North Star, but also really just focusing on like the task at hand and the next indicated step in the process, right? So not like stressing out about, getting too far ahead of yourself, but really perfecting and like just knocking it out of the park with like what you're doing right now that's going to get you to like that next small incremental step.
Yeah, I think the other thing for me too, when I think about if I could tell myself something earlier on in my career, at the time when I was saying, man, how can I make 6 figures in sales? I think the advice I would give now is the very cliche, your net worth is in your network.
Yeah.
And I realize now in hindsight that in order to get to, significant income levels in sales or any other profession, right? Any other career track you decide to take, it's really key to start developing mentorship relationships. Hard to do, honestly, in 2023, in the age of kind of work from home and Zoom meetings. It's harder now to develop than it ever has been, but it's super important because if you have people that have been on the journey longer than you, who can coach you on how to do things in a with the right finesse, then you'll actually get there a lot quicker because they will show you the way to get there. So I look back at some of my career milestones where I had a mentor, several mentors actually walk me through how to ask for a 6-figure salary, right? How to ask, how to get there, how to interview well, how to prepare, how to show results and tell my story and those kind of things. So if you're out there listening and you're wondering, how can I get to that 6-figure sales role? Start to network, start to find a mentor. Yeah. And mentors can be your boss. It can be people in your company. Again, it can be relatives, friends, neighbors. But it can also be, people that you follow online, and it can be really anybody, but you got to kind of open yourself up to feedback and to coaching and to having those kind of conversations. But if you do that, I'm a big advocate and can say firsthand that it does work to get you to where you want to get to.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And while it is like a little bit harder now because we're not in an office and you can't go into like, down the hall and talk to someone, but with LinkedIn now and with the way that like, just technology is the internet. I mean, you can, reach out to someone across the pond in England that you really admire and like, maybe get a couple bits of advice from them. I have people that reach out to me on LinkedIn all the time, and I usually take those calls. Like if someone's like, hey, I'm early in my career, I just wanted to bounce a couple ideas off you. Like, hell yeah, I'll take a 15-minute call or I'll answer your questions via chat. Like I'm always down for it. And I think a lot of people, like, I think you'd be surprised, like take a swing, The other thing I wanted to bring up too, and it reminded me because I was talking about Brian Tracy and you had brought up like writing your goals down, and it made me think of that Brian Tracy book. But the other thing too, and because we're talking about people kind of like, getting unstuck in your career, like getting to like that next job that's going to, really pay you what you want. And this is what like got me out of that boiler room in San Diego. It was in I invested $1.83 in a used paperback of Advanced Selling Strategies by Brian Tracy, who is like this old school 70s, 80s era. He would do like seminars on tape for like people that were realtors and insurance salesmen and stuff. But the advice is like awesome. Like you can't beat it with a stick. And one of the things he said, and to paraphrase, was like most sales reps will stay in a go nowhere dead end job that they're underpaid for because they just have fear of the unknown, right? They're afraid their next move is going to be a failure. They think they won't be able to make it. They're afraid of challenging themselves. And I was like, once I read that, it was just like it was a kick in the gut. It was like, oh well, I fucking have to get off my ass and like try to really go for it, And so, like, I'm sure, part of your audience might be able to relate to that. If you're early in your career and it's like you're comfortable somewhere, that's the worst thing. If you're really comfortable somewhere, you like the people you work with, but it's like you are underpaid and you'd really like more money, it's tough to leave. But
Yeah, 100%. So you talked about the guide that you put together that's focused on career pivots. Walk
mhm.
your coaching that you do. I know you work with some clients on career goals and milestones. Walk us through maybe what that coaching program would look like, so that if anyone interested out there wants to take a look at it, they
Yeah.
can learn a bit more about the process.
Yeah. So, well, like the coaching one, you can get it for free. So I have the two guides on my site right now. They're free, and like I spent a lot of time on them. So, and the coaching is really in most cases driven by those guides. So really like taking people through the guides, making sure we're doing the workbooks together, and then helping them unpack all that stuff. Like there's the written guide and then there's an accompanying workbook for each, and the workbook is more like extracting data, thoughts, experiences, and everything, and then I'm helping you like decipher like what that is, what are the next steps. I'm helping make suggestions like, hey, you should think about doing this next in your career, taking this job, interviewing here, or you want to talk to these people to do some discovery if this is the right job, this, that, and the other thing. A lot of times too, I'll go through my network and just see if I can make connections for people as well. But I can do like other coaching outside of that too, that's not really driven by those frameworks that I develop. So that can be someone who's like, you're in your career and you're just shit, I don't know what I should do next. Like I want to stay in sales, I don't know what my next sales job should be, I don't know what the good companies are, I don't know really what I'm worth on the open market. Or it can be like, I want to stay where I am, I want to negotiate a raise, like how do I go through that process? It could be interview prep, it could be just any number of things career related, and most of it's going to be designed just to giving people direction, right? Because a lot of times people, they just they have people in their life that have ideas, but maybe they don't trust those people because they haven't been where they're trying to go, or they don't trust their own thoughts and ideas. They're like, well, this is what I think I should do, but I'm not an expert at this, I don't know. So I can offer some guidance and clarity there.
Yeah, there was something else I wanted to ask you about too. First of all, your social media game, your LinkedIn game has been awesome. I really love seeing the memes in my new game. You posted something a while back that really struck a chord with me. I want to get it out there, and it was about how quotas get set in
Oh,
modern SaaS company. And it's honestly something that I think I knew, but to see it all laid out and to see the math behind it was a little. So I'm
yeah.
just phrase it really quickly, but I want to kind of get your deeper thoughts on that post. But high level, it was basically a post about how when you work in a SaaS company as a seller, your quota gets set at the highest level, probably by the board of directors or the investor, maybe the CEO, probably the CROs in the room. And then that CRO takes the number and pads it, right? So numbers like 12 million for the year, maybe not the year, for the quarter. They'll pad it a little bit and then kind of pass it down the chain. So at the end of the day, the reps are the ones kind of carrying the brunt of the revenue goal for the company. And if they miss, it's likely designed to where their leadership doesn't miss. But maybe like expound on that a little bit, because I think this is an important topic that a lot of people need to understand. After you kind of explained your thoughts on it, I'll share why I think it's important to know this.
Yeah, and like I just learned it like in the past, like I don't know, maybe 6 months, and it blew my mind. Like it was something like I always thought about, like how do they come up with this shit, you know? Like, and it was actually the guy that he's one of the executives at RepView, and he posted about it, and then I commented on Twitter, and I was like mind blown, and we unpacked it a little bit more in a thread on Twitter. But yeah, you laid it out perfectly, and it's the same concept as like as an AE, you want to have like 3x quota in your pipeline, right? You want to have like 3 times, maybe even 4 times more than you're going to need, because some is going to fall out. So at the executive or the board level, they do the same thing with quotas, figuring that like, oh, there's going to be maybe market conditions, like we've seen that a lot in the past 4 years, or there's going to be rep attrition or something like that. So we have to protect ourselves against those things. So the goal is really 10 million, but the CRO is going to say, well, from my 4 VPs, I'm going to need instead of 2.5 million each, I'm going to want 3.25 each, right? And then as it gets kicked down the line, it can get padded a little bit more. So yeah, you can have a rep who's like stressing out to hit this quota, and oh man, I finished it like 68%. I feel rotten. I'm getting put on PIP, like all this stuff, and it's like, actually, you hit the number you need to make for the organization. Like you hit your obligation to the organization, but it seems like you're way underperforming, and it's unfair and it's bullshit. And I hate it. And it's one of the things I hate most about the game. And I posted that because it blew my mind. And I wanted every single rep in my network to understand like what's going on. And it's horrible. I mean, it's a horrible thing to do to people.
So the reason I think it's such an important message to get out there, and it's one of those kind of constants in the business. I don't know really how to fight City Hall on this.
Yeah.
And I don't want to encourage anybody out there to go and throw a fit in their VP of sales or CRO's office this next week. But I think it's important to just have the knowledge and the awareness that is the case for one big reason, and that's mental health. Because and we've probably talked about this, you and I've had guests on the show that talked a lot about mindset and mental health and trying to stay mentally strong in this game. One of the big problems is, back to your example of the rep that might hit 68% or something, and they're beating themselves up even though they delivered the amount of revenue that they needed to deliver as set by the company. There's still a psychology at play, and it's really easy to be hard on yourself, and it's easy to walk around with your shoulders slumped, feeling like you're a failure and a fuck up in the business, right? When that's just not the case. And so I want to get this word out there that this is something that does happen. I don't know what the padding looks like in your company, to the listeners out there, but it's something to just consider, that likely your number is, I don't want to call it an unattainable number, because maybe that's not the case, but it's probably padded with some extra revenue in there to make sure the people above you on the chain can hit their targets. So please,
100%.
you miss your number, it's not because you suck. It's not because you're a bad seller. It's because you're part of a imperfect system, frankly. Now, again, I don't have the solution. I don't know what to do about it other than to try to keep your chin up, stay, mentally healthy and positive, and keep trying to play the game. But it's, sometimes it feels a lot like those games at the carnivals where they're totally rigged. Sometimes you hit the milk bottle, the milk glass bottles, but you're not going to hit them. But you have to try to focus on the times that you do, and the wins. And that's the, kind of my strong thoughts on that. So I was glad to see you post that. And again, I think I had heard that at some point in my career, but it really brought it front and center to me when I saw that post and really looked at the numbers and thought about, again, how many times I beat myself up for hitting less percent, when in reality I was probably overachieving.
Yeah, no, 100. It's such a great call out too. Like, do not beat yourself up. Do not like think that like you can't do the job or you're ineffective or something. It's the game. It's not the player, right? What was the other thing I wanted to say about that? Drawing a blank here. Shoot. Oh, yeah. And like, so generally speaking, 60% of reps are going to miss quota each year, right? So that should tell you all you need to know about the way that quotas are set, right? More than half, you're in a room of 10 reps, six of you are going to miss for the year. And I've been on sales teams where it was like no one hit, like we had one guy out of 10 that was at 100%. And so I had a VP at one place, and they rolled out quotas and we were all stressing out, and then because no one was hitting them, and it was like no one's ever going to hit this, and he was like, look, just get to 50%. That's all we need. Just get to 50% and no one will care. And I was like, that blew my mind because he was an RVP, but it was probably giving me some insights into like how that thing was set.
That reminds me, I've had some very transparent sales leaders, especially in the earlier stage startups, that are very realistic. Like, hey, let's just hit this. This is what we're expecting to keep the game going. So let's just try to it maybe half, like you said, half of what you think you need to hit. So I do always appreciate when there's some transparency. What would you say? So you've been playing this game for a long time. You're transitioning out of it. You're a strategist now, and you're out of kind of the carrying of a bag type of business. But you did carry a bag for a really long time. And recently, I've had a lot of listeners reach out and say, "How can I manage the stress of being in this industry, having the weight of a quota on my back, having the expectation of being able to consistently deliver quarter after quarter?" What are some things that you've done over the course of your career to manage your stress, to manage the anxiety that comes with playing this game?
Yeah, and like, to be frank, I maybe wasn't the best person at that through my career. So like a lot of this is hindsight. And just, as you get older, you get a little more wisdom and you become better at like managing your internal world, right? But like good sleep hygiene, basic stuff. Try to like fill your body with good foods, drink water, exercise, stuff like that. Mindset, like we've been talking about a lot, like understand that like, you were hired by your company because they knew unequivocally that you were the right person to do that job. So you can do it. If you're not hitting some arbitrary bullshit number month over month, like don't make that the end all be all. Instead, set like an income goal for yourself and perform against that number and make that the thing that you're performing against month over month. Don't worry about the quota, right? That doesn't have anything to do with you, kind of, right? It's like it's a scoreboard type thing you can put on your resume. And like the other thing I would say too is like figure out what play is for you. Like the opposite of anxiety and dread and worry and doom is play, right? So we all got out of playing when we were children, but if you pursue play and the things that make you feel playful, like it takes a lot of stress off. So for me, I'm a freaking clown. Like I'm always, if I can joke around and at least crack myself up, like, that's everything for me. That takes a lot of anxiety and stress away. So at work in 9 to 5, I'm always cutting up and like saying weird shit and like just like, and a lot of it's just to crack myself up. But like also, like you got a guitar, I got a guitar right there. Like just if I'm like about to crawl out of my skin 5 minutes before a big presentation, I pick that guitar up and I just start, banging away on it. And it's like it engages this other side of your brain because you're playing and you're totally out of it. And I would say the other thing, and the reason I learned about like pursue play is like, get into therapy. Like we all have this history of like, childhoods and baggage and mistakes and relationships and like worries and anxiety. And like, I think it's a very small percentage of the population that can manage all that stuff on their own. So like, don't don't be shy about like getting into therapy, going, once a week, once every 2 weeks, and just, bouncing all this stuff off someone else and get really, really, honest and vulnerable with them. And they'll, kind of help you find the answers to like managing your inner self more efficiently and being like, a better person as a result.
I love the play. I actually just heard about that. I was listening to Brene Brown, actually, of all people, and that may be where you heard it from.
Uh,
And yeah, I think we as adults get away from just playing, and it is like the
mhm.
of anxiety and And you got to find what that means for you. For some people, that's going to be playing a sport, riding bikes, lifting weights, whatever it is. For some people, it's music, art, painting, whatever that is. Find what your play is, and that's going to help you actually completely disengage from what you're doing day to day and de-stress. So I love that example. Totally agree with all the things, physical and mental health. One thing I'll add though, and this is something that I talk about a lot on the show, and I've talked a lot about to my network, which is one of the things that you can do to curb anxiety. And I went through a period of several years where I had the worst Sunday scaries, as they call them. And I even had it so bad that I would get the Saturday scaries, which is just a terrible way to live. Like when your Saturday evening starts to you get anxious about the week ahead, something is wrong, and you got to figure out how to fix that. I'm going to give you a couple of ideas here. So yeah, this is just, again, a terrible quality of life when you're sitting around on a Saturday night dreading the next week. And I went through about a 2-year period where that was the case, and it was the worst. And this is the period where I really wanted to walk away from the profession and go do woodworking or something like that. I was like, I got to go do something. I'm going to go get a construction job if I have to, because it's probably better than sitting here on a Saturday night stressing about Monday morning, which is just ridiculous. So Saturday scaries, hopefully not. That's really extreme. But a lot of people feel the Sunday scaries, where Sunday night starts to roll around and they're realizing tomorrow they got to do this, and they got to be on at 8 a.m. on the Zoom or in person or whatever it is, and they've got to deliver this week. If you're feeling that, one big thing that helped was I now block just not even an hour, usually like a half hour is enough. Put a half an hour on your calendar at around 1 or 2 o'clock on a Friday. Usually things are dead Friday afternoon anyway. Before you head out of the office on Friday to go do your thing for the weekend, just spend 30 minutes planning for the next week. And in that planning, you tell yourself, I'm going to go ahead and let go of all this because I am now in control of next week. Here on Friday, I'm writing down the big things that I'm going to deliver next week, the big meetings I have, the proposals that are due, the demos that I've got to get on, whatever those big kind of scary things are, or the one-on-one with my boss. And in my case, that's been the big scary thing in a lot of my career is, oh shit, I've got to do forecast next week with our CRO. He's going to, tear me a new one over this deal that I put in the pipeline that's not going to close, right? So whatever that thing is, it's scary. Just kind of write it down and plan. Just write it down, come up with a plan, think through how you're going to approach each thing, do it on Friday, and then close the book and enjoy your weekend. And you don't have to think about it because you've done the preparation for the week to come on a Friday. So that's one big thing that helped.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and the other thing that I talk about a lot is just being a business person and not just a salesperson. If you make that your North Star, not focusing so much on being great at sales, it's great to be great at sales. And of course, that is part of being great at sales. But if you focus on business acumen and not just sales acumen, what'll happen is you might get some negative feedback from a sales leader, from a prospect, from somebody at some point. You're going to get some negative feedback. But if you know inside that you're a good business person, and this is just one tiny aspect, one tiny blip of being a business person, it's going to be a lot easier to digest that feedback and brush it off a little bit. And in some cases, you need to ignore it too, by the way. But just knowing in your heart that you're a good business person is actually going to be key to kind of building that confidence. And you'll find that it actually eliminates the Sunday scaries or some of the anxiety or stress that comes with delivering. Because when you become a good business person, you realize that businesses are cyclical, and you're going to try to deliver most of the time. All the time is impossible. Nobody delivers every single month, every quarter, every year. It's just not possible. You're a human being, and businesses are cyclical. They're up and down. But the key is to try to be as consistent as possible. Perfection's never part of business. There's no business that's perfect out there. And no, Apple's not perfect, or Google or whoever, Meta. I can say these companies are not perfect either, right? So the goal is being really good at business acumen, being as consistent as possible. And as you start to focus in on being a better business person, you'll round your skills out. It'll build a lot of confidence, and you'll find that anxiety starts to go away because you realize I'm good at a lot of aspects. I'm a business person. I am responsible for my business, but I don't have to, fall on the sword if I have a bad month or a bad quarter. So that's more of a sales mindset. A business mindset is like, yeah,
Love it.
goal. We didn't do so well this month. We're going to do better next month. And here's how we're going to do it. Right. So those are my 2 pieces of advice for anyone out there who's struggling with, anxiety, Sunday scaries, and all that stuff.
That's such a great point. And it does 2 other things that are like really, really, profound. One is that things stop happening to you, right? It stops being personal and it's just business, right? It keeps you in that mindset of like, this is just business. This isn't personal. They didn't say no because I'm ineffective or they hate me. My boss, they're talking to me in a certain way I don't like, but it's not personal. He has business stresses, right? He's a business too, right? So it's just business. So that takes a little bit of the burden off you personally. But the other thing too, if you're a rep and you really view yourself as like the CEO of Jesse Woodbury sales agency, and you start thinking of your employer as a client, you start thinking about like, well, is this really a good client? If just working with this client, is this the best thing for my business? Or is there another client that would really make my business more profitable? Like if you start thinking in those terms, right? Because we talked about before, like staying in kind of like this job that really isn't going to align to your goals just because you're comfortable or something. That's a good way to like kind of detach yourself from it and think about it in business terms. Like, is this really good for the business? Staying here and just making this amount of money and, year over year. And that might be something that helps you to like, get to that next step and kind of get out of your comfort zone.
That's so awesome. Well, Chris, where can my listeners get into your career pivot guides, and where can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so definitely like follow me on LinkedIn, and then Chris Dankowski. That's how you find me. I got to be the only one on there. I think there's another one, but like he's in Poland and he doesn't look anything like me. So, and then the other thing too, my website. So it's dankow.ski. That's the actual URL. It's just my last name. So dankow.ski. And there's the 2 free guides on there. There's my newsletter. And I think that's pretty much it. Like it's really simple. So go, check it out. Hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'm around. Yeah.
I love that your domain is .ski, because I'm assuming like skiing, but you've incorporated it into your last name, which I think is dope.
Yeah. Love it.
Awesome. I will post both of those in the show notes. Chris, absolute pleasure having you on, man, and can't wait to have you back on again soon.
Dude, thank you so much, and congrats on the continued success with the podcast and everything. I'm a big fan, so it's great to be here.